So this is where I am in the process of fitting the staves. I told you that I was going to cut them exactly to the same length, and then I put exactly the same tenon on each one. Just shy of an inch long so it doesn't bottom out in my 1 inch deep mortise. They're all marked many times. Each one has left, right, and the numerical, the way they relate. So I just fit this one in, and it's got the little stub tenon on it. And what I did was I got this surface to join really beautifully to this surface. And as I brought it down, I could see how it was aligning with the mortise. If I was parallel with the mortise with that tenon, which is what I was striving for, I was in good shape. Otherwise, I took my number 7 plane and cut a little more off this side, a little more off this side to get it to align. So there it goes. And it fits nicely. It's right up to the next one next to it, and it's very close to my line. I could take a shaving or two off of this side. I might or might not. So now stave number 3. Same deal. This side has, this looks rough to me. I don't know what it is. It looks like it's off the saw, but I've not beveled it as far as I can tell. No, the bevel's way off. It's just a rough surface. So I need to bring this into shape. Now I can see my tick mark, and it's about a good, I don't know, not an eighth, but somewhere in that range. So I'm going to take this saw and rip off about a good strong 1/16 and then do the rest by hand. This is the setup for cutting the spline. The spline is a really important part of this chest design. What it's doing is it's locking the staves together so they can't rotate beyond the tenon. I want some flexibility, but I want them also to be connected. So I've made a little 3-degree piece of wood. That the back is oriented to that. It's nice and stable. The back is flat. And also now I'm going perpendicular into this 3-degree bevel that's cut into the edges of each one of the staves. So I don't need to do it to show you, but I'm just going to go over the saw. And it's about somewhere around 3/16 of an inch deep. That's all you need. So at this point, I have all the staves fit into the top and the bottom. They're all well marked because they could easily be turned around left for right or right for left. The first step I did was, once I had them all fit, was to polish the back. That's the reference surface for cutting the groove for the splines, and I was doing a very, very small amount of adjustment, maybe a 1/64 of an inch in a couple of places where the back wasn't a fair curve and they weren't joining nicely to each other. So as I was polishing them, I was taking a little bit more off, some of them more than the others. So now I'm at the point where I'm starting to compass them. So I set up a gauge for about the depth that I think I need to go down into the 2 edges to create that shape. I have my pattern that I'm going to use to follow with some black on it so I can rub it on here and see where the high spots are. I've got my scraper, and let's just go ahead and start doing it. And this takes some time, but the deal is working with a long plane. I'm going to just start taking this oil. I could mark the center line of this stave. I'm not going to touch that. I know what the shape is. I don't want to work too aggressively here. I could work a little bit more aggressively. And then lighten the cut up as I get closer to the final shape. As it gets closer, use my pattern and rub it, and you can see these little black marks that show up. That's where I need to take more off. A good visual guide, what needs to happen. And as I get closer to the shape, I'm going to switch planes and kind of refine this now and sort of work over the whole surface. Taking it down the center line last. not a curved blade, although it would be nice if it were. And it's pretty good. Still some spots here. And the final step is to take that scraper that I made, and it's got a nice curve shape to it, which does both halves, and use this to now scrape this to a nice consistent curve. One way and the other. Scrape the entire thing. And granted, it is not as beautiful a surface as the plane, but I'm not opposed to using a little 320 sandpaper to bring it into a beautiful fair shape, and then be able to finish up more to compensate for the fact that I've torn the fibers a small amount. Another detail that I'm going to use on this chest is this bead running along the front edge. This is where you lift the lid from. I'll chamfer the underside, bead on the top edge. What I like about the bead is it makes this stave and this stave look more similar in shape. It rounds this edge. I could chamfer it, I could do lots of different things, but this seems like a nice detail. There's no other beads on the piece, and it doesn't matter. And the way this works is that I made a little cutter with this bead profile. This bead profile right there. And I chose that size thinking it was about the right scale for this. I have a red line along the top, and I just scrape easily. I can go in either direction depending on the grain. As long as I'm making little shavings, I'm probably doing pretty effective work, efficient work. And you see me make these little cutters. It's a question of filing them and then honing them. And the only place that's tricky is at the end here, because the cutter sort of falls off, and I have to do a little bit of shaping with a file, which I have, and a knife, which I have. I've already done this end, and then a very, very bit of small sandpaper just to fair it up perfectly the way it was. But I think it adds a very nice detail here, and something that's well worth the several minutes that it takes to do it. I'm ready now to do the wavy abalone line. So this is that center stave, number 4 of the 7, and I wanted to have that be prominent, so that's why I decided to go to 7 and not 6, way back when I was working on the design. And what I'm going to do is a dot coming in from each end, so I don't have to go all the way to the end. I think it looks better that way, to stop previous to the end, before the end. The wavy line is going to go between here and here, and I made a simple pattern, just a wavy line with a spoke shave. And what I find works well with these lines is to have sort of a different amplitude and a different wavelength, you might say. So some places it's a little bit tighter together, and some places a little more broad, the waves. Nothing specific about the pattern that I made. I just made it sort of free form and had fun with it. And it's going to line up this way. I'm going to clamp it down tightly, probably 3 clamps, maybe some little double-sided tape so it can't move. And what am I going to excavate with? Well, first of all, I've got this knife that I made, just a piece of ebony glued to the side of this little X-Acto, or little scalpel. And the thickness of the ebony is equal to the thickness of the abalone I'm going to put in. So when I run this along the pattern, I'm going to be making a line on the outside of this excavation. This is going to run along the inside of the excavation. I've got 3 different tools to excavate that groove once it's defined. I've got a very fine square type tip here that can get in there and work like a little chisel. That's essentially the same idea. I'm working with something that looks like this scraping. It's not the best way to use a tool like that, but it works. This is a little bit broader one. And then I've got a little sizing tool. When I've got it very close, I'm going to run down with this sizing tool, and this is very, very close to the size of all these little abalone strips that I made. I saw it and saw it and saw it. There's about 30 of them here. I have extra ones. And I use a little jig for that, which I think I've already showed you, but if not, I'll show you when I'm done. So next step, clamp this down, very carefully start in, and I'm going to get started, and then I'll show you where I am. Okay, the first step is to go down along the pattern with a knife. Just being careful. The pattern is nice and smooth, by the way. And then to follow it up with my knife and go equally against the pattern. And that defines the width of the groove that I'm going to excavate out. So I've got it defined now. I'm going to go down a couple more times so it's, through the surface a little bit, not very deep. And then I'm going to start excavating with probably this tool. Just getting in there and try to excavate what I can. And then this tool, which is narrower than the groove, should also work against the pattern and excavate it out. So the next step is to work down along that defined groove with this wide scraping tool. Now, I'm making nice shavings, so this is nice and sharp, and I'm making it look easier than it really is. It took a long time for me to evolve these tools to do this particular deal. Even though I've done lots of wavy lines, this was a different beast because it's a lot wider and a lot longer. So once I have gone through the entire line with this square tooth, excavating it out, the next step is using a sizing tool. This is sized with a caliper exactly to the size of the abalone that I've already made. Okay? So once I get in here with this tool and scrape along, give you a little better view here. As I scrape along, the idea is I'm just sizing it out. And I've got to be relaxed. Let the tool follow the groove and just try to bring it to an even depth. For the ends, I'm using a chisel that's roughly the size of the groove. And I can come in a little bit from the side. No, it's too fat that way. Come in with a finer chisel and just excavate this out right to the end. So it's a nice clean stop. And then the individual pieces of mother of pearl and abalone that I've made, this looks like mother of pearl, but it's abalone, will fit right in there. I'll crunch them down in there with a little bit of super glue and get them as low as I can, flush with the surface. And I've got to lay them all out in a line because I've got different ones that are quite blue and some that are much more white. Here's one that's quite blue. It's going to be quite beautiful, I hope.